All right, so it is a little bit past 12, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to Crash Course of Climb. So if this is your first time being here or watching this recording, I'm going to kind of give you a little exposition of what this is and how it works, and then we'll get diving right on into it. So first off, if you've seen, I guess, probably the first one, two, or like three of these that we did on the recording or whatever, or if you saw some old marketing, we did originally have these going on at Friday at 6, but now we're doing them every Tuesday at 12 o'clock throughout this entire semester. So yeah, here we are at 12 o'clock. That's what we're doing. It's going to be primarily presented by myself. There's still a chance I might ask someone to jump in on one of these, but I'm not really sure. So otherwise, just expect to see me. I'm the climbing tower lead, Josh Leyland. And yeah, so each week we're going to have a set topic that we talk about basically. So in the past, we've done things, as you can see here, like modes of climbing, knots and hitches, and talking about like gym to crag type of stuff. It all makes sense if you kind of watch through the recordings there and get the gist of what's going on. But yeah, pretty much it's gonna be sessions that are instruction and discussion based little webinars basically. So ideally we have people that can ask questions and we can kind of discuss some things and go through it as is. And then every now and then I do an instructional bit, such as the knots and hitches where it's, we have a presentation, but it's more, me demonstrating skills that you can try at home. So tying knots, I believe next week we're going to be working on climbing anchors. So if you have things that are available to do that, then you can practice doing that there as well. But yeah, that's kind of the format of the whole thing. So like I said, we have a weekly topic every single week. So we'll dive right on into this week's topic, which is the sender's guide to climbing movement. I call it a sender's guide because when you send a route, that's climbing without falling. So it's kind of a fun thing to call it, I guess. So yeah, we're gonna be talking about climbing movement. So when you're climbing, right, there's a lot more that goes into climbing up a wall than just like yanking yourself up, muscling yourself up. There's a lot of technique that goes into it, a lot of thoughtful movement. So really, we're going to talk about a few tips to kind of start improving that climbing movement from the get-go. Like, whenever you're learning how to do anything new, you want to learn the basics, learn the small things that you can do to immediately change your technique. And then from then, we're going to talk a little bit about like how to advance past that and how to kind of train your movement going forward. So yeah, first, like I said, we're going to talk about the fundamentals. So the first fundamental that I tell anyone I see if they're coming in and they're getting tired really quick or anything like that is to straighten out those arms, right? So I have a picture of the same guy doing the exact same start on a route, just either with straight arms or with bent arms, right? So, obviously I X'd out the one that has the bent arms. You can immediately see with the way that he just looks and the way his muscles are tensed up that in the first picture, he looks somewhat relaxed. I mean, granted, he is holding on to a hold, so he has to put some tension in there. But compared to that second picture on the right side, he looks very tensed up. He looks very tight. He looks like he's trying a lot more than he is in that first picture. So it makes sense to say that he's not going to be able to hold onto that hold for quite as long, and it gives him less time to rest or to look for a next move. So keeping straight arms when you can will give you the opportunity to look for another hold or rest and kind of relax in that hold, get some of the blood flowing back to your arms by shaking them out, that sort of thing. What we want to think about is that you're trying to load your skeleton and not your skeleton and your muscles, because either way, obviously your skeleton's going to be holding some of that weight. But if you bend your arms, then now you're putting your muscles in there as well. So you're just kind of using unnecessary energy for the most part. So as you can see also in that second picture, he's quite a bit closer to the hold. It might feel comforting and it might feel right to be, close to the wall and close to the holds, because you want to, you don't want to feel like you're falling off the wall. But actually, like when you want to relax like this, you're going to want to lower yourself out, kind of extend those arms, and allow yourself to sink if that's what happens. Like in that first picture there, it might not seem as close to the wall or seem natural, but that's going to be, it's going to give you the opportunity to save that energy and get a good view of what's going on. Now, something that's kind of interesting is the idea of shoulder pivoting, right? So when you're climbing, you might be thinking like, if I'm keeping straight arms, like how am I supposed to reach the next thing? How am I supposed to, actually like go out and get that hold without bending my arms? And I'm not saying that you shouldn't bend your arms. Like bending your arms is a totally correct thing to do at any point. You'll find many climbers bending their arms, of course. But the main thing is to try and get straight arms when you can. If it's an option that you have, you should usually be taking it. But shoulder pivoting, what that allows you to do is kind of reach farther and still keep your arms pretty straight out, right? So if you have your arms extended, you can, I guess, back this up just a little bit. But if I'm reaching out towards the camera, right, my hands are going to be almost at the exact same distance, what I can do is I can rotate one shoulder forwards or backwards, right? And then that's going to give one shoulder a little bit of an advantage, a little bit more distance. So if I'm here and I have both my hands at about the same length and I decide to pivot, this hand is going to get a lot closer than this hand is. And that's the same kind of idea that you can use. So if you look at that first picture where the guy is sitting there with his hands on that one, big orange hold, what he could do is if he wanted to reach out to the left, say, he could turn his left shoulder even closer, roll it inwards, so that way his left arm can reach farther while he still has a straight right arm. And again, that's just going to allow you to keep, you from having to bend your arms if you don't have to. It's going to conserve a little bit of energy. It's also going to kind of warm up that shoulder and give it a little bit more flexibility, ideally. So that's kind of like another way you can keep straight arms. So yeah, to reinforce this, again, we're really doing this to conserve our energy and just give us the most options on the wall. So the next thing we're going to be talking about is the climbing shoe and proper footwork, right? So in this picture, I do have kind of like an anatomy of the climbing shoe and where you use things. We don't really care so much about like the inside and outside edge and the heel at this moment. Those are very useful tools, of course. But we're mainly going to be talking about that on that right shoe, the toe box there, the toe. So I have a climbing shoe with me right here. It's going to be the same sort of deal. When I talk about the toe box, I'm really talking about just like the top tip of the toe, not the entire front of the shoe, though there is rubber all over the whole thing. I'm just talking about the tip here. So when a climber is climbing on literally anything, like if it's like really big footholds, if it's really slabby stuff, like you'll see in that picture in the bottom left there, he's climbing on very, very slight and very slanted terrain that doesn't have a lot of big feet. No matter what you're climbing on, the goal is to generally try to land on it with that toe. And that's for a couple of reasons. The shoes are built, with a lot of stability and thicker rubber at the toe. So that way, the toe is what's taking the brunt of the work. It's built that way. And the shoe actually loads your feet and your toes into the shoe in such a way that the combined strength of your toes makes a super toe of sorts. And that, gives you a single point to land on. So this is very precise. This is very strong, very stable is the idea. Another bit about why you'd want to use a toe is, let's just say my hand's a hold of some sort and you step on it in the middle of your shoe. You just place it here, and if you need to pivot, let's say towards the computer screen in my case, if you decide to start spinning your body, you're going to rotate that shoe off the hold and it's going to fall. Whereas if you have your toe on the hold, so this is the same situation, right? And I put my toe on the hold, if you pivot, it's going to spin on that hold. It'll move a little bit, but it'll just be a rotation. It won't necessarily be like peeling off of the hold. So that alone is going to offer you more stability is the idea. And using that toe, it's got a lot of rubber. You're gonna be able to spin on it. If you lose a little bit of friction or rubber, that happens. That's fine, but at least you're still on the hold. So really, with proper footwork, the main thing about wanting to use proper footwork is that it lets you use your legs a little bit more, right? So you can pull yourself and yank yourself all day on your arms, and that's great, but your arms are only going to be so strong, right? Your leg muscles are much thicker than your biceps are. So if you have good stable footwork, and you can stand on all sorts of things, big or small, however it be, and remain stable on them even as you move across them, then your footwork is going to provide a much better basis for your climbing technique. It's going to allow you to step on weird sorts of feet and then push off of them confidently, as long as you're standing on them correctly. So really the main takeaway here is, on a climbing shoe, try to step on all the holds with your toe. You don't necessarily need to also dig it all the way into the wall to the point where the tip of the shoe is rubbing on the wall, because you're going to wear out the tips of your shoes that way. But really just getting a stable foot that has reasonable surface area for what the size of the hold is, and stepping on that with your toe, that's going to give you the most options, the most success when climbing. So yeah, we're going to keep moving on to the third and I believe the final fundamental that I have on here, which is managing your center of gravity. I have shortened that down to COG, C-O-G, for just visual sake on this presentation, but that's going to be center of gravity. So in this picture, actually, I have a picture of a climber. She is something outdoors. She's doing a very wide split, and I have actually thrown a symbol for the center of gravity. Right, so this is actually kind of like the universal symbol for center of gravity. And what I'm trying to say here basically is, as a person, most people will find that their center of gravity is somewhere around their kind of belly button and hips area. So what that means is, you want to try to make sure that that center of gravity is centered above whatever your foundation is, right? You don't really see skyscrapers that just, go up and then jut to the left and then go up again. That's not really a stable structure. You're going to have all the weight centered over exactly where it's going to be. It's like how, the tippy top of the Eiffel Tower that's pointed in, like if you look at it from a bird's eye view, it's going to be directly in the middle of the 4 supports that are there. Same sort of thing goes for climbing. You want to try to make yourself stable before you engage in a move. Otherwise, you might do what we call barn dooring, which is where, a climber starts swinging on the wall, kind of like a hinge, like a door hinge uncontrollably. There's all sorts of little things that you can do to improve your stability, and that's going to be with managing that center of gravity. So the first thing I put here really is that, if something has mass, which anything on Earth that exists has mass, then it's going to have a center of gravity if you account for all of the weight that it has. And you're going to want to center that center of gravity over your supports. That's like the whole thought process behind how a center of gravity really works. So yeah, what you want to do when you're climbing, at least to manage that center of gravity, is if you're going to be going for a move that's to the left or to the right, or even if it's going up, you're going to want to try to keep your hips, first of all, close to the wall. If you bring your hips out and you're really far away from the wall, then your center of gravity is going to want to tip you away from the wall even more than whatever it was before, and that's going to place extra strain on your hands, right? Because now you have to hold a little bit tighter because you're kind of pushing yourself away from the wall, and your center of gravity wants to tip you off of the wall. And then secondly, if you're moving left or right, to get the most stability, you're going to want to kind of put your center of gravity under the area where you're about to head to, and then grab the holds. So that way, when you do have the holds in your hands, the center of gravity is directly below wherever you're grabbing. So that way there's no weird swinging thing. You could think of it as like a playground swing. If you grab something first, so say like the ropes that connect the swing to the pole, that's your arm. If you have that attached and grabbed to that pole before you move the center of gravity below the swing, then if you let go with your feet, then the swing is gonna it's gonna happen. So your body's gonna swing. You're gonna be lose a little bit of that control. Whereas, in a swing, if you move the swing directly under the bar and then, let go of your supports, whatever is keeping it from moving, it's not going to move, right? Because you've centered it below that center of gravity and everything's good to go. So in this picture, really, you can see that this climber could have kept the feet to the left side and then reached for the hole they're going for now. And then, if they would have grabbed it, then they would have swung out to the right. But what they've done instead is they've propped their foot out way to the right. So that way they have, 2 supports to the right and left, quite far apart, but then that puts their hips in the middle. That way they can grab that hold and they won't really swing that much. They're gonna, they might move just a smidge because they're not directly below it. That center of gravity is still a little bit to the left of that right hand. But they're going to be a little bit more stable than they were before. And that's kind of what you want to be doing with all the climbs you're doing. The best way to practice is when you get on the wall. Just pick climbs that are well within your ability limit, and exaggerate this movement. Put your hips directly below every move, like very exaggerated, and do that so that you can kind of feel it work, and you can feel the stability that you get from doing so. So that way, when you climb on stuff that's more at your limit or pushing into that limit, then you can kind of intuitively throw those hips under, to throw that center of gravity under wherever you're heading to, and then you can begin to develop that awareness and that stability. So if you would like to kind of practice why this works, a great way to do this is if you're standing up and you kind of get your feet separated apart, if you are to stand on one leg, you're going to have to shift your body to the left or right. That simply is the way it is. If you have kind of a split going on with your feet and you just lift one foot up and don't do anything, you're just going to fall on the ground. That's just how that works. So if you do that, you'll notice that your whole entire body, mostly your hips and your stomach area, is going to shift on top of one leg, and your other leg is going to be dangling, doing whatever. And that's going to give you the ability to remain stable. The same works even if you have your feet really far apart. I mean, again, if you are not quite doing a split, but you're like a sumo wrestler stance, if you lift up one of your legs and then don't do anything, you're going to tip over like a chair that's lost 2 of its legs. But if you do kind of throw yourself over the other leg, like you kick off with the leg that you're deciding not to stand on and remain on top of wherever you're standing, well then you're going to be able to sit on top of that. So that kind of lends itself to the fact that sometimes you have to use momentum to get over it. This climber, if she wanted to be a little bit more stable, because she's in a splitting position, it's going to be difficult to slowly ease yourself off that foot and then shift your weight over. So she might have to kick with her left leg to, quickly move her hips under that hold. So that way she already has that stability, because she might not be able to just slowly pull herself into something on difficult holds like she's probably dealing with right there. So that's something you can try if you would like to. If you want to feel it and notice it, then that's going to kind of, help you. Like just standing on the ground kind of works the same way. it's going to be the same sort of deal on the wall. You want to make sure you have that center of gravity centered below and above what you're standing on and what you're, holding on to as much as possible. There's only so much you can do really. So yeah, that's basically our fundamentals. So again, to recap, that's going to be straightening your arms out whenever possible to conserve your energy. That's going to be having proper footwork, using that toe of the shoe on basically everything, and then just being very precise with your footwork, very controlled. And then the third right here, again, that center of gravity, which is going to be shifting that center of gravity below and above your supports that you have on the wall, which is your arms and legs. So then we're going to move into using routes to determine movement, right? So what I mean by that is, seeing the handhold, seeing the way that the route moves, and letting that kind of dictate how you're going to function on the wall and how you're going to, move directionally. So what I've done for y'all here is there's a picture of a climber on an indoor wall with just a bunch of random holds all over the place, and I've put arrows on every single hole that that's mostly in the picture, which is indicating the direction of pull that you want to grab the hold, right? So there's all sorts of handholds. That's pretty clear at this point from this picture. You have some that are good, some that are bad, some that you have to kind of pinch your grip on, some that are very slopey, you have to press your hands on. I believe we've talked about the types of holds in another video, but I'll kind of go over it just again a little bit to kind of get the idea better here. So the first thing really though is when you look at these holds, right, there's a certain place where you can grab them, and that's going to tell you which direction you should load the hold. Now, speaking from a physics standpoint, right, if you have a flat surface, and obviously these aren't all flat surfaces, you're going to get the most friction and the most grab on a flat surface if you apply force directly perpendicular to it. So just straight, you have a flat surface here, the force needs to come straight down to get the most force, the most friction force and the most grab. If it tilts, then you're going to lose a little bit of that friction force, and you'll need to supply more force to get the same friction as you would if you had a perpendicular force running straight down onto it. So you'll see that as exemplified in here by the arrows that we have on the holes here. So if we look at the pinch by her knee, for example, left knee there, that pinch hold, I call it a pinch because you have to grab it by, putting your forefingers on top and then opposing with a thumb, kind of like pinching like a crab. What you'd want to do to get the best grip on that hold is you'd want to make sure that your arm is running in that same direction as the arrow. Now, I don't mean like pressing down on it necessarily. I'm saying that the force applied by your hand coming from your arm should be applied in that direction on that part of the hold. So if you look at the holds that she's currently holding on to, let's look at the right hand, for example, right? That right hand is slightly tilted to the right, but it seems like it has good bite. She's got her fingers inside of it, it would seem. So for the most part, you're applying that force directly down. And if you look at her elbow, you'll notice that her elbow is applying that force directly down. The elbow is going to kind of, if you tilt it, it's going to change the way that force is going, because wherever you're pulling on with your hand, your arm and the direction that the arm is facing is going to, kind of give the tell of how that's going to work. Now, granted, if you look at the left, we'll see that it's slightly tilted to the right, so she's pulling to the left side a little bit. But you'll note this time that, her arm isn't actually facing to the left, and that's just because she can't get her arm out long enough yet to apply that force in that way. So what she's doing is working. It's just that she could get a slightly better pull or bit of friction on that hold if she just takes that arm, which is going straight up, and then tilts it just a little bit out left like that. So yeah, the same is going to be for all those holds. Some of them get kind of funky. So if you look at like this orange hold to the left of the hold she's currently holding with her left hand, or the teal hold that's just a bit further left, then those are going to be holds that you grab and pull directly from the side with, right? So those are only going to be useful if you're on the other side of them and you take your arm and stretch it out and grab it directly from the side. That's going to give you the most friction. You could get under it and start to use it, but then you would have to press a lot harder to get the same amount of friction as you would if you're just pulling directly from the side. So yeah, you kind of get the gist of that. You're also probably going to start to get the gist that this isn't always going to work perfectly. We're just going to try to get as close as we can to being perpendicular on the hold. Some routes, they're difficult because these orientations are good and they're there, but you kind of have to work yourself into the orientation to get that max holding power. So before you can get in that position, you do have to use the hold sometimes, at a disadvantageous position. So I guess An example of that might be if you're using maybe the pinch to start, like that pink pinch to start left knee. If you were to start on that hold, you could probably prop your body to the left and under it, so that way your arms are in line with that force. But when you get on it, if you don't have that opportunity, you might be directly below on it, and then it's going to twist your hand a little bit, twist your wrist a little bit, and you're probably going to have to grip just a little bit harder to get the same amount of friction that you want on that hold. But yeah, so really, like without these arrows, though, the best way to tell kind of which way you're supposed to treat it is, if the hold, for example, leans to the right, right, then that means that you want to direct your mass to actually the left. It says the right there. So yeah, the hold leans to the right. You're going to want to make sure that you are in line with it, right? So the hold, originally, you'd be holding it straight up and down. If it gets tilted like that, I think this is the right. I'm not really sure if the Zoom video turns it around. If it gets tilted like this, then you're going to keep the arms in the same direction. So if my arms are facing dead straight up and the hold goes like that, then my arms should be trying to load in that direction as well. I might have to throw my body weight over there so that way my arms are coming from over there so I can load that hold in that direction. If the hold is like this to this direction and I'm on the other side here and I'm trying to use it, there's going to be so much twisting with my wrist and there's going to be such a tight grip that I would have to hold to even make that useful. So you want to try to put yourself in the direction that makes the most sense, right? So yeah, when looking at a hold too, you'll also notice that in this picture, at least mostly indoors and sometimes outdoors, it depends on the route. The chalky portions of a hold are going to tell you, what the best place to grab it is and kind of the direction you want to grab it. So I think my favorite example here is this red hold that's directly above her head, right? So that's a kind of a very geometric, pointy kind of edge right there. And you'll see that there's a decent amount of chalk just where the arrow is. And that chalk line is actually like a literal line of the flat surface, right? So that gives you a spot to kind of tell exactly how to grab that hold perpendicularly, right? You're going to try to hit that directly facing onto that surface and on that chalky portion because people seem to think that's the grippy spot of the hold. Now, that's not always going to happen. And sometimes you'll have holds that aren't quite as chalky. You won't really notice as much. For some reason, these red slopers over here to the right, these big circular red holds, they're not very chalky. So it's going to be kind of hard to tell which part of the hold is, oh gosh, which part of the hold is, quite useful. But, you work with what you can. Those are pretty well-rounded all around. So depending on which angle you're hitting it at, you're going to change where you grab it. For those slopers, if you're directly below them, you'll hit them directly from the top probably. If you're to the left of them, as she is right now, if she were to reach out, she might try to grab them directly from the side or slightly on top if she lowered her body down. There's a lot of consideration that's going to go into how you grab a hold, but really like the best way to figure it out is to go on, a wall and kind of feel the holds, feel, what works, what feels like you're getting the most grip, the most load on. And then just trying to, if you find that a hold is difficult to hold on to, then trying to hit it perpendicularly, hit it where the chalk is, and put your body in a position that will load your arms in the right direction. So yeah, there's a lot that goes into this, and this takes a lot of practice. So the best thing you can do again is find a wall and try this stuff out. And then a continued portion of this, I do believe this is the last slide, so we'll be wrapping up kind of soon. But basically, this is a note about using your feet again to kind of move up and onto a wall. So on a wall, you'll notice all the holds that there are. Sometimes you'll have a lot of small foot chips, so that might tell you where to put your feet if you're looking at the holes in the wall. And if not, if like everything's big, kind of like in that big picture where there's, just a whole bunch of big blue holes for the most part, well, then, you just have everything to work with and you have a lot of real estate for your legs. So really what I'm trying to say here is if you are climbing and you feel like everything's out of reach or, like, how do I get to this next thing? It's so far away. The first thing that you should try to think of is I need to move my feet up. I need to get my legs up. When you're climbing a ladder, you're moving both your feet and your arms at the same time to go up the thing. So when you're climbing, you should do the same thing, right? So you don't want to, hit a couple holes and then get really tipped out, really reached out, and then get stuck, So on that blue route, for example, she could have kept her feet a little bit lower, like 1 or 2, maybe even 3 holes down, and then try to reach for that same thing she's going for, but then she'd be reaching way up high and she might not be able to reach it. So what she's done instead is using the toes in her shoes. She's stepping on those holds there, and and she's gotten her center of gravity a little bit higher, and she can kind of pivot over onto things because she has some more options over there. I guess if you look at the right picture here, the guy's kind of in the process of it. He could probably reach that hold if he was standing both feet on the hold where his left foot is, but instead he opted to raise his right foot up. So that way, if he wanted to, he could remove his left foot and stand up a little higher on the right foot to reach, whatever hold he's going for there. Again, just even by visual inspection, it's very clear that, your leg muscles are far larger than your arm muscles. So, you should be putting those to work. You should be climbing with your legs as much as possible, right? A lot of climbing really is honestly just standing up on things and doing squats kind of, and then grabbing holds just to reel yourself in and orient yourself. I mean, every now and then you have to use your arm strength. You have to move through things and push with your arms, but your legs should be doing a crap load of the work when climbing. If you find that your legs aren't tired or your arms are super tired when climbing, then try to think more about using your legs to push yourself through routes and getting those feet up to get yourself out of a stuck position. So yeah, that's honestly a lot about climbing movement and some basics. There's a lot more that goes into climbing movement. There's specific moves and movements that are very technical and very useful for certain types of climbs. But honestly, just practicing these basics and going through this stuff and just being very intentional with your thought process when climbing with this stuff is going to sail you through your starting phase, right? You're going to find that your climbing will improve very quickly if you've not been doing these things. So it's definitely worth the practice, definitely worth the go to get on the wall and try this stuff out. So yeah, that does conclude the presentation. I don't believe there's anyone to ask questions right now. So if there are any questions, you can always reach out to me at joshua.leyland@ucf.edu. And I'm always happy to answer any questions that go forward. And that goes for any of the other presentations that you've seen. If you have any questions about any of our past topics or future topics, anything like that, then you can hit me up there and I'll always be happy to answer those questions. But yeah, without further ado, we'll be doing, I believe, like I said, anchors next week. So that's climbing anchors. That's a very big loaded topic. We're going to try to talk about them conceptually and also do some instruction with that. So if that's what you're like looking forward to, then get stoked because I'm pretty excited about it. But yeah, other than that, that's pretty much what we have for today. So thank you for coming. I have to end the recording.